Hi, welcome to my podcast, Becoming a Cut Flower Grower. I'm your host, Lydia, and I'm here to share my year of growing and selling cut flowers. I'll be giving you the lowdown on everything I'm doing and sharing all the highs and lows, the good times and the inevitable disasters, all in real time. Join me on my cut flower journey, starting right now. Hello, thank you for joining me. It is Thursday evening, the 27th of March. I have really exciting news for you. If you're a regular listener, you know I've been talking about my baby Kylie all the time, who's a chicken, by the way. And she had 3 babies last night. So I am beyond excited for her because she's been broody since the beginning of February. And she was absolutely convinced she wanted to be a mum. And now I have to say she looks completely shell-shocked and very flustered. And I'm not entirely sure that she knew what she was asking for. Anyway, she's got 3 gorgeous, tiny, fluffy little babies who are keeping her on her toes. So that's very exciting and a really great start to the upcoming weekend. So the last time I spoke to you, which was Tuesday, and I'd been busy doing battle with the nettles, and I am still doing battle with the nettles. I haven't done any more seed sowing for now, and I have actually been out working, and that always gives me the chance to listen to other people's podcasts, and I found a new one this week, which is called, I'm going to share it with you because if you have space in your life for another podcast about growing cut flowers, so far I've only listened about half a dozen episodes and I'm really enjoying it. So it's called the 6-Figure Flower Farming Podcast. And it's a fantastic American lady. She's in the New York region. And she is what I would call a proper flower farmer, as in she has a lot of space and she's been doing it for a decade and she really knows her stuff. And I've been listening to a number of her podcasts in the last 2 days and I've been completely blown away because she's so business focused. And it's been like an epiphany moment for me because I have been so incredibly focused on choosing seed, sowing seed, all of this sort of seed business. And I haven't been thinking enough of the business side of things. So if you said to me, oh, what are your overhead costs? I wouldn't be able to give you that figure. If you said, oh, what are your production costs? No, I wouldn't be able to give you that figure either. Now, to be fair with the production costs, that's quite tricky because I haven't got any experience, so I don't know. And I did make records last year, but having listened to this lady on the 6-Figure Flower Farming Podcast, I really need to get myself better organized. So she's raised a lot of really important things that I want to think about. And I'm going to be thinking about them next week. Well, I'm going to be thinking about them this weekend and for the next few weeks because it's really kind of altered the way I think about what I'm doing. I've just been, I think, focused so much on the growing part because, you know, it's a long winter. You really want to get started. You get into March and you're like, okay, let's go for it. Without really thinking about, well, how many plants am I going to grow? How much space have I got? How much space am I allocating to each plant? Like really simple stuff. So you remember me, I was very excited. I worked out I'd got 48 square meters to grow in. I was like, woohoo, you know, this is amazing. Yes, I've got a calculation, but what does that actually mean when you've got a greenhouse and a home absolutely chock full of seedlings that in a month's time are all going to need a home? Have I got enough space for each one? And this is the key point. Am I going to give each plant, or each variety rather of plants, the same amount of space? And having listened to this new podcast, I don't think I am. So I'm going on a massive data collection and analysis push this weekend. Now, dealing with data is one of my favorite things. I'm really nerdy, really geeky, whatever you want to say about it. But I just love it. I love collecting data. I love messing about with it and analysing it and seeing what it means and what you can learn from it. And I actually used to have a job years ago as a data analyst, and I really, really loved it. It was so amazing. And I spent all of my time just studying data and messing about with it. So much fun. And so this kind of flipped a switch in my brain yesterday when I thought, well, why don't we come at this whole enterprise from a completely different angle, which is from a data analysis kind of perspective, rather than just sowing masses of seed, rushing out to the plot, putting them all in the ground, and then be like, ta-da, now we just wait for somebody to buy them. That's not very business-like at all. So I'm really, really going to be crunching some numbers this weekend, and I want to go and look at that space with a much more critical eye and think, actually, how much space am I going to be allocating to all these plants? So as part of getting the dahlias out of the spare room and waking them up, I have counted them all and written down all the different varieties. And as things stand, I have 46 dahlias, which is just, I had no idea it was that many. I thought somewhere around 25. So I've got 46, and they're all going to need a home, and they need to be spaced 2 foot apart. So they're going to go in, they're going to take up one whole bed on the plot, and they can be spaced 2 per width, and then they can just have the entire of the rest of the row. So that makes life easy because I can get the staking in place and just dedicate one whole row. So that makes me think, oh, okay, well, I've got 3 rows left. Well, I haven't really, because rows 1 and 2 have got perennials in them already that I had hanging about, or that I'd started in the trial beds last year and worked out. So I've kept them. So I'm thinking, well, I've got all these guys in the greenhouse. How do I work out what should get priority? I mean, until you've done this, how do you really know what's going to be the most productive, profitable flower to grow? Now, I did mention that my guess was going to be dahlias, but this lovely lady doing the American podcast was like, you know, she runs courses and she asks people, what do you think the most profitable flower is? And they all say dahlia, and then they actually work out all of the production costs for dahlias, which is high, because you're constantly twiddling about with them. You've got to store them all winter, and then get them out, wake them up, divide them, plant them up, look after them all summer. Then you've got to dig them up and dry them. And honestly, that is a whole process in itself. Drying them, packing them up, storing them over the winter. So if I'm really, really honest with how much time the dahlias are going to take, it's probably going to be pretty enormous. So they had better pay for their keep this year. That's all I can say. But this is the thing I hadn't really been thinking about. So what this lady suggests doing is having like a production cost sheet of paper, or you could do it on your computer or your phone if you wanted to. But she's a bit like me, likes to do things old school. Piece of paper will do the job. So you have a piece of paper for each flower variety, and every single time you do something with that variety, you clock what time you started and what time you finished, and therefore how much time you've spent working on it. So even if it's like 5 minutes of watering, you write that down. 10 minutes potting up, or 5 minutes doing a feed, whatever. You write the whole thing up so that you know how much time you've spent on them. And ideally, what we need to be doing is an even more granular look at that. So you need to be able to work out your production costs per square metre or per square foot, whichever one you want to use. And even I'm having a dither about which one I want to use, because I'm the generation where we used feet at home, and then when I got to school, it was all meters. So I can do both, but there's that little tiny part of your brain that's like always doing the calculation from one to the other. Some things I just automatically think of in square meters, and other things I think square feet. So I'm going to have to make a decision, I think, which one I'm going with. And I'm tempted to go with square meters because I think a square foot of growing space is not very big. So I think I'm going to go with square meters. So once I've worked out like production costs per square meter, that's going to help me when it comes to doing profit margins. And actually, realistically, like a square meter of dahlias, how much does that cost me to produce them? And what's the limit on what I'm going to be able to sell them for? So off the back of all of that news that I've learned from these podcasts, which I'm still listening to all of them now, I have grouped my seedlings, they don't know this yet, into 3 priority categories. So it's a bit like when you go on a plane, you're either going to be in first, business, or economy. So this is how my seedlings are going to be flying this year. So in the first class lounge, you are going to get all the special treatment and all the free sandwiches and all the bonus stuff. I have put the dahlias, the zinnias, the sweet peas, the amaranthus, because I know they'll sell really well, the scabious, excuse me, which I haven't grown from before, so I don't know what that's going to be like, the achillea, the white one, which again is new, and snaps, which I've had a mixed result with in the past, but I know that they're popular as well. So that's like my top tier category, and these are the seedlings that are going to have more space, more attention, more just more TLC, really, a first class flying experience. And then in the business class seats, we're going to have the cornflowers, the cephalaria, which is a massive 6-foot job, the craspedia, the little yellow golf balls on sticks, and the orlia, which is that's just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous filler. So that is the business class ones. So they're going to get less focus, but still be important. And then my economy flyers are going to be the breezer, which is that little grass with the dangly bits, the calendulas, amimagus, nigella, and the new one, didiscus, which I have no idea what that's going to be like. So I've put in my notes here, relax about these. So important, yes, but slightly lower priority, because I can't now, having listened to this lady, give everything the same priority, I think. Anyway, that might be a mistake. Anyway, that's how in my brain I've done it. So I'd like now to share some of the other key learnings that I have learned in the last day, because I think they're really, really interesting. So I've kind of mentioned one of them already, the importance of tracking your production costs and writing this down. So I am going to be making up some pages of A4, just white printer paper, and putting the title, the variety of the flower on the top, and then noting down everything that I do with them. And I think that would be relatively straightforward. Like, I've had a bit of a practice already with my cornflowers. Where did I put that? My cornflowers. So like the selecting and the ordering process took about a quarter of an hour. Sowing them out, quarter of an hour. Planting out, well, I don't know for that, but that you get the gist of it. That's like as far as I've got with that one. So I'm going to get them all set up and just leave them in my flower file, and then I can make sure that I record all the time. And then, of course, I need to work out how much square footage I'm going to allocate to them. And then just keep an eye on that, because I know with the second and third successional sowings, the seedlings may end up going somewhere else, unless I just earmark the beds and say a whole section, this is all just going to be cornflowers. And when I've used up that section, then I can't put any more down, because otherwise the risk is, I guess, if you just go up there with trays and you sow everything, you might, I might run out of space. Okay, I need to think about that as well. So second learning is to calculate profitability per square meter or square foot. Right, do that. Third thing is to do some research into bunch prices so that when this fabulous florist who I'm hoping to sell to this year, when she comes up to the plot, I can actually have an intelligent and informed discussion with her. Because let me tell you what happened with my pricing in 2024. Honestly, like, don't laugh too hard at this. It's so embarrassing because I didn't know what I was doing last year. In fact, it won't come as a shock to you. I don't know what I'm doing this year. But last year I had these trial beds and I thought, well, at least I'll have a practice and see what it's like. I'll buy all my seeds cheap from the supermarket and I'll just grow a whole load of stuff and I'll see if I can work out the spacings, because it's obviously different when you're doing cut flowers to when you're gardening. And I'll just have a tinker about with it. And I grew some lovely things. So then I was like, well, I'm going to have to sell them now. So then there was a whole, trauma of contacting florists and sending out emails with availability, and nobody wanted anything. And eventually I went in physically to a florist carrying great big bunches of stuff, and I plopped them down on the counter and I was like, would you like any of this? And the girls were lovely and they're really fantastic local florists, and they were like, yes, we'll have some of this and some of this, that's great. So I went back the next day with bunches, and their faces, now with hindsight, their faces were a picture, because I didn't even have the proper buckets to transport them in. So I wrapped them in damp newspaper to get them there. And I do actually have the round black buckets that don't have holes in it that you would store cut flowers in, because coming from a gardening background, like, everything I have has holes in it, because the first thing you do when you see a container is put holes in it if it doesn't already have holes in it. So I don't even remember how I ended up with these like florist buckets, but they wouldn't stand up in the back of my car because the seats go down. I've got a hatchback and the seats go down, but they're not flat, right? So there's a bit of a slope. So the sunflowers were also really, really tall, because I didn't know what length the florist would want, and I didn't want to preempt anything. So I cut them really long, and so they wouldn't stand up in the buckets, and then the buckets all were falling over. So I was like, you know what, just get some damp newspaper, just wrap everything. So I turn up to the shop with these bundles of beautiful flowers, but a very bad presentation style. And what I should have done is, like a proper European person, is just pulled my car up on the street outside the shop, held up all the traffic, and just unloaded everything like a civilized person. Instead of which, I parked in a car park that you have to walk, a little distance, not miles, but you do have to walk to get to the shop. So everything kind of got knocked around in the car. There's me lugging it over my shoulder in all the excitement of oh, somebody wants my product. So I plop it down on the table. Bless them, I didn't even have a clue what to say in terms of money. Like, I hadn't even had that conversation. I was just so thrilled that somebody wanted to buy something, and the florist offered me a price, and I just went, yep, lovely, and that was it. So she got the money out the till, she paid me, and I walked off, and I was so excited. And when I look back on it now, I think, wow, that may go down in history as the most unprofessional, disorganized, unbusiness-likey thing I have ever done. And I come from a background of sales and marketing and PA work and all of this kind of stuff. And I've held business meetings with really important people and done deals for tens of thousands of pounds. And now I'm literally just accepting a few notes for something that I carried halfway across town wrapped in newspaper. So that is not happening this year. And that is why I need to do a lot more research into my pricing, so that the florist and I can have a really comfortable, easy, informed conversation about it, where she can tell me what angle she's coming at it from, and I can tell her, well, look, these are my production costs, this is a rough idea of my overhead costs, and this is what I'm going to be looking at per bunch or per stem for this particular variety. And then we're going to have some wiggle room about what the final price is. But if I just stand there like a lemon, holding my hand out, grateful for any little thing that she gives me, terrible, we're not doing that. not doing that. Other learnings. Okay, so I learned something interesting today that I hadn't heard before from this American podcast, and that's all about shrinkage. Now, this is something that florists kind of accept as just something that happens when they order loads of bunches from their wholesalers. Not every single stem is going to make it or is going to be good enough quality. And so they just write it down as a bit of a loss, and it's called shrinkage. That's basically when what you've ordered comes and it's smaller than what you were hoping to have. And I guess if you have maybe, I don't know, 50-60% of the bunch is no good, you can contact your wholesaler and get a credit note or whatever. I don't know how it works for florists, but what is important for me is that I won't be having any shrinkage, because I'm literally going to be cutting the night before I deliver to whichever florist or outlet I'm using. And all of the stems are going to be in perfect condition. So even last year, with that complete mess I made of delivering to the florist, everything was in excellent condition. The fact that it didn't travel particularly well, I'm going to have to address that this year. But the point being is that this is a selling point for me, because when the florist is paying for a certain bunch, a certain number of stems in a bunch, certain bunch size, she's going to be able to know that everything in that bunch is going to be absolutely perfect and usable, and there's going to be no shrinkage. So it's better value for money for her on that. And the final learning is that I really need to think much more about the business side of things, like the profit margins, the overhead costs, the production costs, the branding, the positioning, lots and lots to think about. And I really wish that I had thought a bit more about this over the winter, because there's quite a lot of thinking time in the winter. There's been months and months and months with very little to do. And now the royal we again, I am really busy. And just when I get home, I just literally just fall asleep on the sofa because I'm so exhausted. And, oh dear, you got me yawning now. I'm sorry, I'll try and edit that out. The last thing you want to be thinking about is all of this sort of stuff. So that is my mistake. But and so yeah, live and learn. If I could pass one thing on to you, it's if you're thinking about doing this, then start your planning in the quiet times of the year, not the end of March. A couple of other things. So one of the other things that I have been listening to is a conversation between this fantastic podcast lady and a florist that she's done a really long interview with. And one of the things that the florist suggested was that growers go and spend a bit of time in a florist's shop or working with a florist to understand what the business of floristry looks like. And I think this is a really great idea. And I have spent a weekend working with a florist many years ago when I was thinking about getting into floristry, before I ended up doing the gardening, and then I've kind of come at it from a completely different angle. And I spent a few days interning, if you like, with a florist, and she taught me how to do a hand tie, and I learned lots and lots of things, one of which is that I just can't stand the cold, so I really wouldn't want to be in a chilled florist's shop because it was just absolutely Baltic, far too cold for me. But I think it's really important to try and fully understand your market. So if you're going to be selling into florists, like, you really need to understand how florists work, like what they want, because it seemed to be from the conversation on this podcast I've just been listening to that there's a real disconnect between what the florist wants and how they do business and how they operate, and how the flower grower operates. And growers obviously making decisions quite a long way back, and they're investing in their product, and then they're getting it ready for market, and then you've really got to have that market ready to accept your product, because it's not going to last. It's like a food, it's a consumable, it has to go quickly. and the florists are working in a different kind of way, and especially if they are importing most or all of their flowers, it is going to be a different way of working for them to be using English cut flowers, where there's a lot more risk in it. There's a lot more unpredictability, particularly with regards to the weather. So I'm really excited about getting to know this florist I'm going to be working with more this year. Excuse me. And building a relationship with her where I can understand more about how she works and what she needs, and how I can fit into that at the same time as me still producing the kind of flowers that I want to produce, like the dahlias and, my roses if I ever get there. Because it's a really symbiotic relationship. You can't have one without the other, although actually the florists could manage without us because they're just importing everything. But we couldn't manage. Well, I suppose we could manage without them. We could sell directly, but I talked in the last episode about why I don't want to do that. So I thought that was quite an interesting idea that was proposed on the podcast about spending time with florists and understanding how they operate and how they want things. I think it would probably be really useful. So that's just something to think about, depending on what stage you are at in your flower growing journey, whether you could go and intern for a florist. And obviously bear in mind that there's loads of different types of florists. So you've got, your ones with the shops on the high street. You've got the people who do florists who just do weddings, and then there are like home florists who do arrangements for clients in their homes, and all sorts of different types of florists. And it could be that doing a couple of days a year interning with one or two of them might give you a fantastic insight into how they run their business and how you could work with them at a future date. So that's where I've got to with that. A bit of a mind-bending epiphany moment this week, and even more for me to think about, as well as everything else. But I hope that was interesting. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful weekend, wherever you are, whatever you're doing in the world. And I will catch up with you next week.